It was the balloons that did it, dozens of them floating against the ceiling in the dining room, tied with gold ribbon and swaying gently in the air conditioning. Little paper crowns sat at each place setting, and the cake, God, the cake, was shaped like a castle. My husband's nephew turned 6 that weekend, and the entire house looked like something out of a fairy tale catalog. Streamers curled down from the chandelier, presents piled high like offerings, and in the middle of it all was my son, standing just outside the circle, his hands tucked into the pockets of his too small jeans, smiling like he wasn't invisible. I remember the moment I noticed how he wasn't called over for group photos, how his slice of cake came last, after the candles had already been blown out and applause had faded, how no one corrected him when he tried to join the other kids in a game and was told to wait. I stood there, watching, frozen by something more bitter than shock. It was recognition, because this wasn't new. This had been building for months, quietly, gently, wrapped in politeness. My mother-in-law, Judy, had a talent for subtlety. She was the kind of woman who could make cruelty sound like a compliment, who always smiled just a little too tight when introducing me and never once called my son her grandson, not even by accident. She had welcomed me into the family with a warmth that felt staged from the beginning. And when I brought Liam into this marriage, my sweet, curious boy who still pronounced spaghetti as paschetti, I told myself it would take time, that families needed room to adjust, that love didn't always come instantly. But that day, standing in her house, surrounded by laughter and glitter and the sound of children screaming with joy, I realized something darker. It wasn't that she hadn't bonded with Liam. It was that she had already decided he didn't count. There had been other signs, smaller ones I brushed aside in the name of peace. The way she gave Christmas stockings to the kids, but not to Liam. The way she posted photos on Facebook from family Sunday brunch, cropping him out with suspicious precision. The way she insisted I call ahead before bringing him over, even when she invited other grandchildren unannounced. And every time I noticed, I hesitated, wondered if I was reading too much into things. If maybe I was being sensitive, overprotective, unfair. But I wasn't. That birthday party confirmed it. I watched Liam walk up to the gift table with his little drawing folded in half. He had worked on it for hours the night before, crayons smudging at the corners, carefully writing "Happy Birthday," even though he'd asked me twice how to spell nephew. He placed it near the presents, glanced around to make sure no one saw, and walked away without waiting for a thank you. And Judy? She picked it up a few minutes later, looked at it, and slipped it under the table like trash. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't that Liam didn't belong to her. It was that, to her, he didn't belong at all. I started noticing the little things after that birthday. Not just what was said, but what wasn't. Not just what was done, but how deliberately it was done. Sunday dinners at Judy's house had always been her domain. She called them sacred, like a sermon disguised as roast chicken and green bean casserole. She expected perfect attendance, family unity, smiles, shoes off, voices lowered, gratitude on display. And for a while, I tried. I brought Liam with me, dressed in collared shirts and brushed hair, hoping to make it easier for her to see the boy I saw every day. The boy who still left the bathroom light on at night and whispered good dreams before bed, just in case that helped them come true. But week after week, he remained a shadow at her table. I remember the day I first noticed the plates. The good plates, she called them. Porcelain with tiny blue roses. They only came out when family came over. Her real family. My husband, his sisters, their spouses, the other grandkids. They all got the good plates. Liam got the plastic ones. At first, I convinced myself it was practical. that maybe she worried about him dropping one. But he was 8, old enough to ride a bike through the neighborhood without training wheels, old enough to use ceramic dinnerware without supervision. Yet there it was, week after week, his place set apart. A different plate, a different glass, a different napkin, as if his very presence came with an asterisk. He never complained. That was the hardest part. He just accepted it, the way children often do when they sense they're not wanted, but can't explain why. He would sit a little straighter, laugh a little harder, try just a bit more, and still end up outside the family photos taken after dessert. I began to study Judy in those moments, her gaze when he spoke, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when he said something clever, how she praised the other kids for the smallest things, a finger painting, a B plus on a quiz, but never acknowledged Liam's perfect math scores or his drawing that got posted on the school wall. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel. It was quiet neglect, dressed in soft colors, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but leaves marks all the same. Once I arrived early and saw her setting the table. She had just finished placing the 6th floral plate when she paused, then opened the cupboard and grabbed a cartoon-themed one with a chipped edge. She placed it down at the end, closest to the kitchen door, the seat that was easiest to miss, the one furthest from her. I watched from the hallway and felt something break inside me. Because it was no longer about forgetting. It was intention, and I couldn't protect him from what I wasn't willing to name. Still, I stayed quiet. I made excuses to myself, told myself that maybe one day she'd soften, that she just needed more time, that love could grow slowly. But in truth, what I feared most wasn't her rejection. It was what Liam might start to believe because of it, that he was less, that he was a guest in his own family, that the warmth everyone else received just wasn't meant for him. And once a child starts believing that, it's hard to unteach. I began to dread Sundays, not because of the food or the formality, but because of the invisible message served beside every slice of pie. You are not one of us. And somehow, no one else seemed to notice. Or worse, they noticed and accepted it. It was parent day at Liam's school, and I was there early. He had begged me to come, told me he'd been working on something special for weeks. I assumed it was a science project, maybe a model volcano, or one of his endless intricate Lego cities. But when I walked into his classroom, I saw it. A drawing, bold lines in red and green, stick figures labeled carefully with block letters. At the top, in bright marker, he had written, "My family." He had drawn 5 people, me with long brown hair, his stepfather, tall with square glasses, 2 of his cousins, and finally him, right in the center, smiling wide, holding hands with everyone. But someone was missing. There was no Judy. At first, I thought maybe he'd forgotten, that he just didn't know how to draw her. But when I asked, he shook his head. He said quietly, "I didn't think she wanted to be in it." I couldn't respond. I just nodded and knelt beside him, letting the truth sink into a place I'd tried to protect for too long. He hadn't misread her. He hadn't misunderstood. He had seen what I was afraid to name out loud. That night, when we got home, he gave her a copy of that same drawing, one he had colored especially for her. He folded it, tucked it into an envelope, and wrote "Grandma" on the front in his careful, slightly slanted handwriting. Then he left it on her porch the next time we visited. I didn't expect a parade, just a thank you, maybe a spot on her refrigerator, or even just a simple smile when she saw him next. But 3 days later, I found it, in her trash bin, torn in half, one corner still barely intact, the red ink bleeding from where it had caught the side of a coffee filter. There were other scraps in the bin, an empty envelope, a coupon flyer, a post-it note with her grocery list. But this was on top, fresh, unburied, as if placed there intentionally, not out of accident, but out of dismissal. I stared at it for a long time, not believing what I was seeing. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it was so small, so deliberate, a message spoken without words. He doesn't matter here. I didn't show Liam. I never would. Some things a mother shields, even at the cost of her own peace. But from that moment on, something inside me shifted, like a quiet alarm that wouldn't turn off. A realization that hoping for kindness from someone determined to withhold it was just another form of slow heartbreak. Still, I tried once more. One final olive branch. I brought Liam over with a framed photo of the two of them from the park, one of the rare times she had agreed to go with us, smiling stiffly as he clung to her side. I thought maybe if she saw herself through his eyes, through this image he had loved so much, it might soften something, unfreeze whatever wall she'd built. She took the frame politely, set it down without looking. Later, when we left, I saw that same frame face down behind the toaster. From then on, I stopped asking Liam to bring things, to draw for her, to call her when she was sick. I started quietly protecting him, the way you do when you realize the world won't. And he stopped expecting anything from her. That was the part that haunted me most. Not her cruelty, not even her silence, but how quickly my son learned not to hope. The question came on a Tuesday. Ordinary, quiet. We had just finished dinner, chicken and rice, nothing special, and Liam was rinsing his plate like he always did, standing on the little stool by the sink. He didn't even turn around when he said it, just stared at the bubbles in the water and asked, without drama or warning, "Did I do something wrong to Grandma?" I felt it in my stomach first, like someone had punched me, gently but deep. I froze, dish towel in hand, unsure whether to answer with honesty or comfort, because sometimes those two aren't the same. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I had heard it perfectly the first time, and he hadn't asked it with bitterness. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even crying. He just sounded tired. I asked what made him say that. He shrugged, said he noticed Grandma always gave the cousins gifts and hugs, but never him. That he used to think maybe she didn't like boys, but his cousin Ben was a boy, and she always kissed Ben's forehead. He said maybe it was because he wasn't really part of the family, that maybe he was just visiting. That last part shattered me, not because it was cruel, but because it was exactly what Judy had spent the last year teaching him, not through words, but through omission, through every empty stocking, every ignored hello, every second plate stacked just out of reach. She had written him out of the story slowly, carefully, and now he had started to believe it. I sat beside him on the kitchen floor. I didn't say anything for a while. There are moments where language fails you, and all you can do is be present, like a lighthouse in the fog, not pulling anyone in, but at least letting them know they aren't lost. Later that week, I brought it up to my husband. I told him what Liam had said. He didn't respond the way I needed. He said maybe I was being too sensitive, that Judy was old-fashioned, that she came from a different time, that at least she wasn't being outright mean, that maybe Liam just needed to try harder to bond with her. That sentence still echoes. Try harder? My son, who had drawn her pictures, memorized her favorite dessert, asked every Sunday if we were going to see her, was being asked to try harder? I realized then how deep the denial ran, that he couldn't or wouldn't see it. That comfort often masquerades as loyalty, that sometimes people would rather keep peace with the person causing pain than confront them and risk disruption. I stopped asking him to fix it. I stopped asking anyone. I knew what I had to do, not out of rage, not out of revenge, but out of protection, Because love, if it is real, is action, and no child should ever wonder if they're welcome in their own home, their own family. So I started planning, quietly. I didn't pack bags, not yet, but I started untangling the strings that had kept us bound to that house, to those dinners, to the illusion that we were one family. And most of all, I started looking at my son the way I always should have, not as someone to shield from pain, but someone to trust with truth. It was supposed to be a quick visit. Judy had made a rare offer to host a small dinner, just us, and though my instincts told me not to go, I did, more out of politeness than hope. Liam was quiet in the car, staring out the window, fingers picking at the seatbelt. I asked him if he was okay, and he nodded. He always nodded. Her house smelled like lavender and lemon cleaner. The table was already set, 6 seats, but not 7. There was no plate for Liam. I stood there for a beat, then asked her casually, "Did you forget a setting?" She didn't look up, didn't hesitate. She just said, as if she were describing the weather, "I didn't think he needed one. He's not really family. He's just your guest. Just your guest." I will never forget those words, not because they were cruel, but because they were said with complete calm, as if it were a perfectly reasonable sentence, as if my son's place at that table, in that house, in this family, had never existed to begin with. Liam heard her. I know he did. I saw it in the way his shoulders tensed. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just walked toward the couch and sat down, small and silent, curling into himself like he was trying to disappear. That night, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I walked to the table, picked up the extra chair leaning against the wall, and placed it beside Liam. I sat down beside him and held his hand. Then I stood up, told him to grab his things, and we left. Just like that. Quiet, controlled, dignified. No slammed doors, no screaming matches. Just a mother drawing a line no one else would draw. I never went back. I stopped answering texts from Judy, stopped RSVPing to Sunday dinners. I deleted the family chat. I took the photo of our wedding off the wall and replaced it with one of Liam and me at the park, where he's smiling wide, holding my hand and laughing like the world belongs to him. Because it should. I didn't leave the marriage, at least not right away. But something inside it ended that day. A thread snapped, trust shifted, and I knew no matter how long we lived under the same roof, I would never again let anyone make my child feel like an outsider in his own life. Months later, I wrote Judy a letter. Not for her, really, but for myself. I told her what she had done, what it had cost, that families aren't defined by blood or proximity, but by presence, and that love, real love, doesn't come with conditions or exclusions. I signed it with my full name, no titles, no roles, not your daughter-in-law, just me. And then I walked into Liam's room, kissed his forehead, and lay beside him in the dark, listening to his breath steady, like it always did when he felt safe. That was the only peace I ever needed,